Hello and welcome, I'm Raziel, and so I thought today I want to talk about why I enjoy Parabellum-Games Conquest. Now, Conquest is a fantasy game. It's quite dark in some places with some really dark themes and factions in there, and it's got its light-hearted and definitely the very good guys. It's got the dichotomy of evil and good, and there's no real in between, which I quite enjoy. I think that's a good idea, that you don't need to have everyone in a grey area of good or bad. Having the two sides of good and bad is really cool, and I think more games should do that rather than having nuance and trying to make themselves smarter than they really are. Anyway, so basically, Conquest is two games. You have the Last Argument of Kings. This is a big battle game. It's rank and file. It's about major battles with big creatures and, just having a lot of fun on the tabletop. And, you could have a decent length of battle here. It could go on for a couple of hours. Now, the other one is the First Blood, which I do prefer because it's a skirmish game. I do like skirmish games mainly because I don't have the time to actually play a full battle game most of the time. I do try to get the time to do it, but unfortunately it's not always the case. Anyway, so the skirmish game is cool because it's skirmish game and it's few models, and you don't need a lot of models to play it. You can make a decent warband out of a leader and a box. That's all you really need to play it. One of the cool things is that I've noticed Conquest, Parabellum Games especially, like you to use all the models for both games. There's no model at the moment, I believe, you can't use in the Last Argument of Kings that you cannot use in the First Blood. So you can use all your collection in First Blood, and you can use all your First Blood collection in Last Argument of Kings, which is a very cool move to be, because it means people can choose which game they want to play and never have to buy two separate armies. You just buy the one that you like and you can play it in both games. Also, with the First Blood being a skirmish game, it means you can learn individual units a lot easier rather than going full on into the big battle game, which is the Last Argument of Kings. And you can learn the little nuances with each model and unit that way as well. So you can get practice with skirmish, knowing what they can do, and then go into the Last Argument of Kings with more of a knowledge of what the unit can do and how to play the game. There's also the many factions. I've said this before, that Conquest twists fantasy. You've got the orcs, you've got the dwarves, you've got the humans. Orcs are Varadran, and they're pretty much orcs, but with dinosaurs. The Radran I should say. The Dragholm, which will be dwarves, I should say. And they're kind of a mix because they are good dwarves, but they have that sort of evil look to them as well, which I think is kind of cool. Humans, you have three armies based on humans, and they're based in history. You have the Arabian Knights with the Sorcerer Kings. You have medieval and King Arthur with the 100 Kingdoms, and you've got the Romans with the city-states. The Greeks with the city-states. Which cool. This is kind of cool because you've got a nice diverse range from the start. Humans aren't just your basic humans, and they're not just bad. They are different, and having them come from history makes them far more intriguing. And the twists on the dwarves and the orcs, like the dinosaurs that the orcs Varadran ride, is fascinating, giving them a more primitive, 40,000 BC. What was that called again? That film with Raquel Welch. That sort of primitive caveman look for orcs, rather than just having them savage brutes. Having this nice sort of, prehistorical twist to the orcs is really interesting. And the dwarves making their machines, but again, it's just something different about them, which is really nice. And then they've twisted the undead as well. You have, I would say technically you have two undead armies. The first one is most common, is the Old Dominion, which are undead Romans, and they're really fun to paint. I've really enjoyed them, and they have like this part history bit as well, and it's kind of weird because the Old Dominion is kind of two armies. You have the Roman side, and then you have this more spooky side, which is far more gothic, and they both look well together and they work well together, but it means you can build two separate armies with the one faction and have very different armies at the same time, which is really, really cool. There's also the Vikings, which are basically werewolves. Again, another twist on a fantasy classic. Vikings, and now they're werewolves too. And you can have giants, which are the gods of the time, like Hephaestus. Seriously, it's really fun stuff because it does twist fantasy to this degree. The artwork is something else as well. I really do enjoy the artwork. The Spire's artwork is pretty much my favourite because it's got like that really old sort of new metal feel to the art. If you know what new metal is, you've got Slipknot, Korn, Limp Bizkit. Well, not Limp Bizkit because they used a lot of graffiti art. Tool, whatever you want to call them. It's that real grim sort of weird surrealist art for the Spires, and I think it's really cool. And you've got some really nice pieces of work, and I think it's a really nice way of doing it because not only that, each artwork, even though they look using the same sort of method to paint, but for each faction looks different. There's a lot of difference between them. When you see the Nordren, I think they're called, the Vikings, it feels very cold and it's lots of blues and whites and greys. And the Spires, there's lots of bone colour. The Sorcerer Kings, a lot of oranges and bright colours. So they do sort of change the artwork for each faction as well, which is absolutely amazing. And then this list can go on for quite a while because everything that Parabellum-Games does is really cool. They also got this living world thing where when they do like a crusade or a campaign, it does affect the world of Eir itself. And that's what makes it interesting. It's because having the actual community have input on how the story is being told gives us a little bit of control over the game itself, and it's a really good way of doing it. And finally, let's just do finally, because the rules are free, the cards are free. I can still carry on, and I really could, but having everything free, including all the lore, all the rules, all the data sheets, really means they want you to play their game, and you can just get straight into it. You don't have to buy a big starter set or anything like that. Just buy the models you want, and then you can just tear away because you can have everything you need for free. Of course, dice and everything else you probably have to buy, but you know what I mean. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video on Conquest. I think it's a fun game. I think it's well worth playing, and it's well worth collecting, and it's really cool. And if you want to get some Conquest stuff, there is Wayland Games down below, and they have up to 20% off. Off Conquest stuff, which is cool. And there is also Forbidden Planet for comics, DVDs, mangas, my merchandise, my comics. If you want to see Little Red Riding Hood go ham on Lovecraftian werewolves, there's also Skyforge. Never forget Skyforge. And finally, there is Patreon, because business. Bye bye.